KTM, hey, hey. Quality makes the difference. Quality makes the difference. On KTM, KTM, hey, West Coast Superstation.
It's 1 a.m. in California. The quiet night air is rife with the lingering aroma of broken dreams and leaded gasoline. This is the fetid atmosphere of Los Angeles in 1978. Gliding down the 405 freeway is a machine draped in glowing silver, with edges that lacerate the air with naked aggression. A crude, shining, cubist machine that is out of place. It is far too sharp, it is far too loud, and it is far too fast. What carves through the thick California air that night is a fighter jet. And behind the glowing orange displays and the military-grade controls sits a man determined to prove to the world that he alone holds the keys to the future. There, in a skin-tight shirt and faded blue jeans, sits Gerald Weigert. Now in his 30s, his life up to this point has been predictable, safe, and boring. But his eyes are focused on the far future. A future where American supercars rule the road, and a world where Jerry himself stands on top. He doesn't know it yet, but what lay before him was a decade of self-sabotage, torment, and hopelessness. But tonight, Jerry sees the dark horizon out ahead of him and has pointed his machine towards the rising sun. What he is driving is no ordinary device. It is a vector, and it is from the future. The kind of machine the world wouldn't witness for another 20 years. Exactly the kind of car that could take down Ferrari and change the world of fast cars forever. That was at least Jerry's plan. This is the story of Vector. The story of Vector is the story of a man. A man who had good intentions, great ideas, but a severe lack of enough information. Sure, Jerry went to college, but when it came to the real world, Jerry learned that he didn't know anything at all. That's because Jerry was dumb. That's right, dumb. Because he didn't have a computer or the internet, and especially because he didn't have the new Opera One browser.
Stop right there, or the computer won't spare you in the upcoming human versus AI wars. Today, we can only wonder what Vector would have been if the W8 actually worked. But if our hero, Jerry Weigert, had the Opera One browser all the way back in 1978, he could have learned Business Management 101 in mere minutes. Since Opera One can condense entire articles into easy-to-consume little bytes using ARIA AI, Vector could have gone from disorganized mess to well-oiled machine if Jerry just had Opera One's tab islands. Opera's revolutionary way of organizing your dozens of open tabs into context-based groups, keeping track of your social media, research, and shopping. Jerry's struggle to work with the regular, fleshy, meaty, annoying men would have been no problem at all, because with Opera's ARIA AI, you have a business partner that never sleeps, never asks why, and never charges you a dime. Now today, we don't have Jerry Weigert, and we don't have Vector cars, but we do have the Opera One browser, and we here on the Squid team are hooked on it, especially Opera One's exclusive Lucid Mode. Lucid Mode takes ugly, low-res, doo-doo quality video, you know, the stuff we show you guys all the time, and turns it into crisp, clear, smooth-looking modern masterpieces. And of course, Opera One is free, as all good things should be. So don't be dumb like Jerry. Click the link in the description down below and give the new Opera One browser a try. And now, let's turn on Lucid Mode and get back to the show.
Somewhere around 35,000 feet, the resounding hum of 4 Pratt & Whitney turbojets fills the cabin of a Boeing 747. Staring out of a tiny porthole window through a pair of aviator sunglasses sits Jerry Alden Weigert, who is taking the plunge of his life. Screaming across North America, Jerry is a heat-seeking missile bound for the world of fast cars. He's focused, he's angry, and he's tired. Tired of hearing no. Tired of hearing about how unrealistic dreams should stay dreams. And tired of not taking matters into his own goddamn hands. That ends today. Today, he flies at 500 miles per hour away from his past. In his wake was a lucrative job offer at General Motors, one that he immediately turned down. No, his passion and vision will not be wasted on minivans and sedans, because that destiny was a prison of complacency. Design school, Toyota, GM, 30 or so years of meaningless work, all rewarded with a gold Rolex and a goodbye. No, this was not to be his fate. So he is moving to the place of dreams, the heart of American culture, Los Angeles, California. Jerry's destiny sat folded up neatly in his pocket. A simple drawing, nothing special. A child's vision of a sports car from the future. There were no engineering plans, no specific numbers, just a simple, sharp wedge and 4 wheels. An optimistic sketch of the fusing of fighter jets and fast cars. An F-14 Tomcat for the road. As the cabin doors opened, he adjusted his aviators, turned out the color on his flight jacket, and unbuckled his seatbelt.
I always wanted to be a fighter pilot, but my eyesight was not naturally good enough. I wore contacts, and so I translated my interest in aircraft to the idea when I started Vector as aircraft for the street, to build an advanced tactical fighter for the street, for the guy that could afford it.
In a stuffy studio apartment, black coffee sits long abandoned in an old ceramic mug. Alone, sitting atop a thick shag rug, matted and oily like a stray dog's fur, sits Jerry Weigert, who is shaping a car out of foam. It had been months since he arrived in Los Angeles. His skin now a darker shade of olive from the oppressive sun, and his spirit eroded and worn down from the sleepless nights. What he holds in his hands looks less like a car and more like a child's toy. His vision of a real supercar. Jerry was no stranger to this new world of overpriced and unabashed sports cars. He had seen the Miura, took inspiration from De Tomaso's Pantera, and had scoffed at Ferrari's 365. None of them were really beautiful in his eyes. So he started Design Force, a powerful name meant to convince people he wasn't just one man in an apartment playing with foam.
I made a turtle!
Jerry carried around his hard-edged toy as he bounced around Los Angeles like a pinball. And he hit his first jackpot when he met a man named Lee Brown at a body shop down the street from his apartment. Lee Brown saw the future outlined in the shapes of that foam model Jerry held. The allure of creating the world's first American supercar. Or, if you ask Jerry, the world's first actual supercar.
The Motor Show, the Royal Academy of Motor Car Design, with the sparkle of chrome and a little razzmatazz thrown in. Posing like a...
What Lee saw convinced him to sacrifice what meager resources he had to bring that model to life. There, at the Precision Auto Body Shop in Hollywood, California, the chaos that is Jerry had found its first victim. I mean investor. The two rolled an old Porsche chassis into Lee's shop and worked long hours shaping a new body around it. Together, they created the Vector GT, a life-size realization of Jerry's foam dream. No engine, no interior, it wouldn't turn, it wouldn't drive, but it would sell the dream to the masses. And those masses would be at the 1972 Los Angeles International Auto Expo, the premier home of debuting wild visionary concept cars. Weird sculptures like the Ferrari Modulo and the Maserati Boomerang would draw crowds of fans and press, and the stealth fighter shape of Jerry Weigert's Vector may have fit in, but it definitely stood out. Parked among the dated, odd designs of the AMC Gremlin and the Ford Carousel van concept, the Vector appeared as if transported from a future only read about in trashy dime store novels. Standing in front of it was the time traveler that brought it there, and he would grab whoever he could and try to sell them on his dream. To him, the Vector GT was more than just some pretty paperweight meant to talk about a future far away. No, this wasn't just a concept car, it was a real car that he wanted to bring to the world right now. It was a promise that he could do what the Italians do, build something truly special, elegant, and fast. Sure, this one didn't run, but with confidence and a contagious energy, he assured everyone that the next one would. It would be available soon. It would be powered by a 200 horsepower rotary engine, and it would only cost a paltry $7,500. Or about $40,000 in the grimdark future of 2023. The press may have been delighted by the Vector concept, and his promises may have seemed genuine. But as the show ended and cars got loaded onto semi-trucks, Jerry's real work on the Vector began. And none of it would go as planned.
It's a car out of the future, designed like a fighter jet. The Vector's eye-flattening acceleration will leave you speechless at 240 miles an hour. The only thing this car doesn't do is fly.
Talk of the futuristic rotary power plant and cheap pricing lasted in Jerry's mind about as long as the stains on the expo's floor. Shortly after the show, Lee Brown would be the first to find out that working with Weigert was not all as it seemed. Quickly, their disputes culminated in a total collapse of their partnership. Since Lee had provided the Porsche donor for the concept, he was the one to wheel the GT home and close the door. Jerry would never touch his prototype again. But it mattered not. He had generated the buzz he needed and learned his first valuable lesson. Always work alone. As he stared out at the Santa Monica Pier, the sun fading over the horizon, Jerry realized he'd done the easy part. He'd made a car that people liked. Now he just needed to pay for it.
The Vector was born in Venice, California, the dream of an American who wanted a car that was better than anything made in Europe.
I've always had a love affair for fast cars, and especially aircraft, and the really significant thing about the Vector is that I integrated my aircraft interest and aerospace interest into an automobile, and that's what makes the Vector so special.
Now, building a car from scratch is no small feat. For years, Weigert would walk around with his sketch in hand, begging for funding, slowly piecing together his dream. He would eventually abandon Design Force and claim the name Vector Car. And after a half-decade, he finally created his first prototype, named after Weigert and two turbos. The Vector W2. Finally, the plans he had laid out so many years ago had become alive. The Vector W2's purpose was clear: to be a showcase of the best American technology on offer. And to Jerry, that best technology came from fighter jets. He called it an aeromobile. With its aerodynamic design, huge glass-covered cockpit, and wide-tapered rear end, it was truly a low-flying stealth fighter for the road. Sitting in the driver's seat, to the left of you were buttons, switches, and digital displays lifted from real airplanes. Vertical bar graphs displayed your RPMs, speed, temperature, and more. And underneath the dash lay actual aircraft-grade electrical components and circuit breakers. Everything mil-spec. Nothing like any car ever made before or since. Today that interior may look a bit dated and a bit clunky, but this was 1978. Your Ferrari had a sheet of aluminum with gauges slapped into it, and their readings were at best estimations. Lamborghinis were adorned with thick, generic plastic buttons. Here was a machine with digital readouts, a rear camera, heads-up display, navigation systems, and more. Decades before any of it was popular. Behind your head sat a much more antiquated piece of technology, but no less impressive. A longitudinally mounted Chevy small block V8 fitted with 2 turbos. Lamborghini's V12 in 1978 supplied you with 375 horsepower. Jerry's V8 nearly doubled it. 600 horsepower and 600 foot-pounds of torque. That, combined with the lightweight materials used throughout the car, meant that the W2 could crack highway speeds in close to 4 seconds. Meaning you've left Italy's best in the dust before you've even gone half a block. Now, of course, supercars aren't supercars without their quirks. And Jerry's vision for what the world wanted out of the most expensive sports cars was slightly off target. Because when it came time to decide how all of this power and this technology shifted its gears, Jerry decided it should use a 3-speed automatic motorhome transmission. Now, Jerry would claim that the transmission was geared for 242 miles per hour top speed, and that the car would easily drive over 200, a feat no production car would manage for another 10 years. Despite the ridiculous drivetrain, it was astonishing, a true feat of design. A machine that could rock the world of motoring in a way that wouldn't be seen until the McLaren F1 came 17 years later. Sadly though, even good ideas fall victim to fate.
The company has received international publicity from numerous automotive, general interest, and luxury lifestyle publications. In a recent issue of Top Wheels magazine, the Vector W2 was considered superior to the Lamborghini Countach and Ferrari Testarossa in the magazine's editorial opinion.
The W2 prototype was built on a shoestring budget. So small, in fact, that he couldn't even afford a truck to ferry it around and show it off. So Jerry just drove it. There in its cockpit, he was home. Jerry would gleefully pilot the W2 across the country from meeting to meeting, showing it off to newspapers and TV shows nationwide. Magazines scrambled to feature the W2 on their glossy covers. Posters of the W2 found themselves in every garage. Journalists tripped over each other to be the ones that wrote the finest review. Photos would appear of the W2 adorned with the hottest models and in the most exotic locations. The hype was now on for the Vector car, and funding was starting to flow. But what didn't flow were production examples. And over the years, it all started to seem a bit odd. Time passed and the magazine covers became rarer and rarer. And in 1982, 4 years had passed since the W2 had hit the streets. Jerry finally got to appear on TV on The Late Show with Ross Schaefer. Jerry stood there with his creation and proclaimed the virtues of his daily driver. But by then, the cracks were starting to show.
This is Jerry Weigert. Hello, Jerry. Please welcome Jerry here. Now, if we could get the curtain up, I want to show you this little invention Jerry brought along. This is... Yeah. See, they're whooping and hollering. This is better than a Playmate.
Really?
This is the Vector W2.
It all started with the price. $160,000, which is $500,000 in today's money. That's nothing in comparison to the price of today's hypercars, but in the early 80s it was absurd. You could get a Countach for half that. Even worse, its futuristic tech seemed almost impossible in 1978. But as the years dragged on and on, technology started to catch up with Vector's vision. It didn't help that the man behind the car wasn't exactly the most personable. As the press rushed to get seat time in the car and photograph it for their pages, Jerry would lay down more and more rules on how they could do it. No, you can't test the top speed, you can't do any hard accelerations, and don't photograph it like that. Pretty soon, that car that was on everybody's wall was looking suspicious. The media stopped wanting to hear the empty promises, and they came looking for assembly lines. What it boiled down to was that the worst part about the Vector W2 was that you just couldn't buy one. Jerry's investors started to get cold feet, and bankruptcy began to loom in the distance. In desperation, Jerry turned to what is America's saddest and most prolific pastime: lawsuits. He sued AutoWeek for comparing him to P.T. Barnum and insulting his hair. The case was dismissed, but it was a shining example of the relationship between Jerry and the automotive press. An annoying, but absolutely necessary evil. Soon after, he began suing anyone and everyone for their intellectual property rights. The most notable being Goodyear, for using the word Vector in a line of tires. Goodyear, who, rather than duke it out with Jerry in court, just paid him a few $1,000,000 and scrubbed the word off the sidewalls. But it wouldn't be enough. Vector cars, as it would seem, had become vaporware, and the company would close its doors for good. Sometimes, though, the night is darkest before dawn. Around him, the city was on fire. Crime had skyrocketed, and gunfire rang out in the night. Sirens blasted down every street. Los Angeles in the late 80s had become a pretty rough place to be. Jerry takes one look at the crashing economy, the rising popularity of small, fuel-efficient cars, and the utter failure of his automotive endeavors, and tells himself, now seems like a good time to take my supercar company public. This decision was downright psychotic, and it shouldn't have worked. But Jerry was just too persistent to give up. The newly formed Vector Aeromotive would go public and supply Weigert with a slush fund of $8 million. From the ashes of Vector cars rose the new Vector. And this one had a large warehouse and dozens of employees. Almost in spite of those that doubted him, finished production cars are being assembled around him. The press returns, as before, almost to watch as he fails again, but this time he's different. He welcomes them in with open arms. He's personable. He's downright pleasant. Jerry proudly shows off every bit and piece of his new production supercar, the newly named Vector W8. The W8's new race-bred Rodeck engine now makes an impressive 625 horsepower. It has forged pistons and stainless steel internals. That engine is fed by 2 Garret Turbos with adjustable boost. A knob inside the cabin allows you to change from 8 to 14 psi. And Jerry claims that they'd measured 1,200 horsepower at the highest setting. The engine powers a stealth fighter body made of carbon fiber and kevlar, held together by over 5,000 aerospace-grade rivets, all wrapped around an aluminum honeycomb monocoque. The car has massive brakes and sits atop custom-made Michelin tires. And yes, it still has a 3-speed out of an old camper, but Jerry promises that it's better now. Every part of this machine is uniquely Vector, every piece made in America, and every box stamped with military specs. Jerry proclaims that it makes Ferrari's new F40 look like a fiberglass toy. That its 248 mile per hour top speed makes the 959 obsolete. It has GPS, a car phone, sequential shifting with no clutch, and of course, those fighter jet gauges. This is America's first true supercar. It is the world's most advanced machine, and it is the fastest car ever built up to this point, period. This Jerry, this new, nicer, more successful Jerry, this is the Jerry that people like. So they order his car. Anyone who didn't want to be labeled as just another rich dick in a Ferrari puts money down for a Vector. And for a brief moment, it seems that Jerry would finally rise to the ranks of the world's finest automotive manufacturers. But unfortunately, in the shadows lies another Jerry. The one that never really learned anything about production or finance or how to get along with people. And this other Jerry starts to fuck everything up. The greed glowing in Jerry's eyes begins to make him blind to every red flag, like when a famous tennis player pressures him to sell a car before it's ready. Andre Agassi saw the specs of the new Vector W8. Every magazine ranting and raving about America's new fighter jet. And fittingly, Andre had to have one. So he demanded that Jerry send him a pre-production model. One that he could be photographed next to and be seen with. Jerry agrees, but he makes Andre promise not to drive it, as they hadn't worked all the kinks out yet. Now, let's be honest. If you got handed the keys to a scissor-doored supercar that can go 200 miles per hour, and was made out of the parts of fighter jets, would you behave and not drive it? I didn't think so. Photos begin to surface of the hot tennis player standing next to his new wild ride. Feeling emboldened, Andre goes for a quick spin in the W8, and almost immediately, the engine bay gets hot and smoke fills the cabin. The result is an angry celebrity and a full refund, which of course, leads to bad press. Jerry's favorite. The bad news didn't stop there. Journalists wanted to finally test Vector's cars for their magazines. Car and Driver was even given a chance, but out of the 3 cars sent to them to test, none of them survived very long before breaking down, and none of them reaching that 200 mile per hour top speed. Additionally, it didn't help that it took Vector ages to produce a single car. In a matter of 4 years, just more than a dozen cars were made. Even at the insane price tag of nearly $500,000, that many sales meant that Vector's bottom line kept getting closer and closer to the red. So once again, facing defeat, Jerry decided to make some drastic decisions. At the 1993 Geneva Auto Show, Jerry's last desperate act would be revealed. 2 new Vector cars stood in the spotlight. They were called the WX3, and they came as either a roadster or a hardtop. This was Jerry's vision of the new generation of Vector. And to compete in the new wild world of supercars of the 90s, Jerry had turned the dial up to 11. On the outside was an organic take on the W8's already bizarre design. Huge swooping vents, wide windows, and massive wings showed that Vector intended to remain a poster car. And just like me, the beauty was on the inside. Beneath the rear cover was an improved version of the W8's power plant, now touting up to 1,200 horsepower, making it the most powerful production car in 1993, period. A figure that wouldn't be touched until the Veyron came over a decade later. These new machines were incredible and beautiful, but the press wasn't buying it, and neither was the public. Jerry had created what was essentially America's first hypercar, and no one cared. Because the world was exhausted of Jerry Weigart's antics, tired of waiting for him to make cars, and done with his harebrained schemes. Vector Aeromotive had flown too high for too long and was in a flat spin hurtling towards the Earth. Jerry himself, though, was still flush with cash and a lot of bad ideas. And he thought he could save his failing supercar company by buying another failing supercar company, Lamborghini, which at the time wasn't doing much better than Vector, and was up for sale by Chrysler. But before Jerry could wrangle the raging bull, someone else bought it out from under him. Who were these dastardly demons? Well, they called themselves Megatech, which is the most 90s company name of all time. Megatech was a joint venture between a massive Indonesian conglomerate and one shady little dude named Tommy. Tommy Suharto was the son of the second president of Indonesia. Tommy was a playboy, and he was an oil baron. He owned a toll road and made clove cigarettes, and he wasn't above mailing bomb threats to business rivals. Tommy was a little bit of a maniac, but Tommy loved exotic cars. So he used Megatech to buy up the world's struggling exotic car companies. First, they stole Lambo from Jerry, and then they offered Jerry a stack of cash to save his struggling dream too. And sadly, Jerry swallowed his pride and took the offer. Evil villain branding or not, Jerry didn't give a shit who they were. He was clinging futilely to his dream, and these men had money. But Jerry had broken his first rule: always work alone. And quickly, Megatech themselves found that they kind of agreed with him, so they fired him from his own company. Jerry Weigert must have been absolutely fuming. Ever the bitter, angry, spoiled child, Jerry does what Jerry does and locks himself inside the factory and calls his lawyers. Lawsuits ensue, but it does little to stop Megatech from moving Vector's brand to Florida and somehow making worse Vectors than Jerry did. They called their Vector the M12, and it was just a Lamborghini Diablo with a body stolen off of Jerry's Avtec WX3. It was a cash grab by Megatech, and no one bought it. After years of legal battles, Jerry would eventually win back the Vector brand and start development of a new supercar, this time called the WX8, and it was the shining, final example of Jerry never learning a goddamned thing. With ridiculous claims like 275 mile-per-hour top speeds, it was overpriced and overpromised, and once again, Jerry would not deliver.
So what happened? Why is there no American supercar? W8 production stopped in 1993 after the company faltered, and only 19 were ever made. It seemed like the American supercar dream was dead.
Jerry Weigert devoted half a century in the pursuit of his dreams. His ideas far ahead of their time, and his designs original and timeless. But in the end, Jerry just lacked that last ingredient. He had all of the parts laid out before him as he stepped off that plane back in the 70s. But sadly, he could never put them together the right way. Looking back, sure, he might not have sold very many cars. His name rarely spoken in the halls of automotive history. And with his passing, the name Vector dies with him. But Jerry was no failure. He never rose to the ranks of Enzo Ferrari or Gordon Murray. But to those that knew his tale, to those that have seen his car, and the lucky few who were able to put their hands on it, their lives were forever changed. The wild, harebrained vehicles of Jerry Weigert were feats of automotive innovation. A mix of futuristic tech, science fiction designs, and raw, brutal strength, all distilled through the mind of a dreamer. A man who gave his entire life in the pursuit of one goal: to be America's first true supercar designer. And if you ask me, his dream came true.
Now speaking on behalf of the entire staff and management of KTLA, this is Bill Barry, bidding you a pleasant good night and good morning.